So I'm going to go ahead, even though Mayor Fleetwood is not here with us yet, go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the April 6th meeting of the WTA Board of Directors. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Donovan.
Here.
Hawkinson.
Here.
Cortice.
Here.
Lautenbach.
Here.
Lilyquist.
Here.
Sidhu. I see you, Darwin.
Here.
Present.
And I believe we have absent Eric Davidson, Seth Fleetwood, and Holly Huffman at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, well, hopefully some of those people can join us soon. Certainly Mayor Fleetwood's trying to join us right now. We'll now go on to citizen communications. Are there any written communications we've received that we need to know about? If not,
No,
are there
we
any members
haven't
of the
received
public?
them.
Any members of the public here, even online, you could raise your hand virtually if you want to address the board. Can anybody look at that? Is there anybody here?
No one who's raising their hands.
Okay, great. I'm going to move on then to board actions. We have 3 board actions, then consent agenda and reports. The first board action is consideration of approval of amendment to the, oh, I forgot to mention, our general manager, Mr. Reardons, is away, and Maureen McCarthy is heading up the WTA administration for us today. This is consideration of approval of amendment to the 2023 operating capital budgets. So that's why I mentioned, Maureen, do you have anything to say, or should we go straight to Ms. Shipman?
Okay, great, thank you. So today we're looking for approval of resolution 342-23 to amend both the capital and the operating budgets. And this has 3 pieces to it, so I'll sort of walk through the 3 pieces, and then Andy's going to follow up with the next item and provide a bit more detail about one of the items. So the first piece of the amendment is to amend the operating expenses for $1,958,336. That is for the ratification of the CBA. So I believe on March 2nd, when the board approved the CBA, Vanessa had indicated we need a budget amendment, and that is to allow us to pay primarily the cost of living increases for 2023 and apply those same cost of living increases to the non-represented staff. The next 2 years of the contract will be budgeted within the 24 and 25 budgets. The second piece is to amend the capital expense budget for $1,111,835,000, and that is to procure 6 paratransit buses. We were able to schedule these for replacement a little bit early due to lower price that we got with the manufacturer, and also to avoid an April 1st price increase. So we've given a verbal agreement to the vendor pending ratification by the board. And then the last piece will be to increase the capital budget revenue by $945,060. And that is to account for the federal grant funds. We anticipate to pay up to 85% of that bus. So we have the 3 pieces. There's a table on page 2 that kind of summarizes what the original budgets are, the changes, and what the ending budgets will look like. And then page 3 and 4 is the resolution. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Will you stop sharing the screen, and any board members online or present?
I'll move we approve resolution 342-23.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second before us. Thank you, Todd. Any discussion on this budget amendment? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and call the question. Oh gosh, how do we do this in a hybrid meeting? I'm just going to call for a verbal assent. If you could raise your hand at the same time, that might help. If you're a voting member, please make sure your mic is on or your camera's on. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? I'm going to say that motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item is consideration of approval of the purchase of 6 standard high floor paratransit minibuses from Northwest Bus Sales Incorporated. Mr. Bowler.
Yeah, so this is part of our replacement cycle. These paratransit buses have exceeded their useful life. Kind of interesting, the current procurement world right now, we're waiting 12 to 16 months to receive buses. We actually just happened to do some poke around, see if there was anything out there, and we actually were at a conference last week, so we hooked up with a vendor. They actually have inventory now. These are Chevy chassis instead of Fords, which doesn't present a problem. It's just there's nothing out there for Ford, and that's usually what we buy. By purchasing them now, we save 15%. The Department of Enterprise will be adding a 15% increase here soon. So by bringing these on board now, we'll save the 15%. We're actually able to bring these into our possession by the end of this year. So, you know, it really speeds up the ability to bring them on now and save some.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? And again, can we stop sharing the screen so I can see board members? Discussion or action?
Move for approval. I got a question.
Second. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. I'll give the second to Mr. Sidhu and Mr. Donovan. Go ahead.
So these are the same thing we just approved the budget change for, and this is the contract for purchase.
Yep. There's no further discussion. We have a motion before us to, oh, sorry, go ahead, Scott.
So in Linden, we have the hop vehicles, which appear to be smaller and maybe more efficient. Would that work as a paratransit vehicle? Because I don't know that you carry more than one person very often in those vehicles.
We are, that's a good question. We're exploring, trying to find something basically in between.
Okay.
Definitely looking at that.
All right.
What you're saying right now is the hop actually isn't paratransit equipped.
Well, it has the thing on the back. Yeah.
It has a lift.
Yeah. So it would work.
Okay.
I think the difference between, and from my understanding, the difference between the hop and paratransit is that the hop does not go to the door and assist people out to the bus.
Right.
Where paratransit, the drivers have some additional assisting duties that some of the hop drivers don't.
I was just wondering if that vehicle would work for both.
Ideally, we'd like to find something in between.
Okay.
And we're looking at that.
All right. Good enough. Thanks.
So I have a question. Yeah, so I have a question.
Dan.
So from looking at this, are these buses going to be the Indira buses?
No, they are what's coming right now from Northwest.
Okay, so this thing with Indira, that's something different, because I just briefly last night I jumped onto the website just to see, and the Indira buses looked like they were using the Ford chassis. That's why I was kind of wondering when you said Chevy. But so currently we're not looking at this Indira then. This is totally different than anything.
Megan, go ahead.
These are Chevy chassis, and they're Starcraft is what they're called. Formerly, I got them like the Starlights. But yes, they are. These are Chevy. There's a group of us that are going to be in Dairy Plant next week, and we'll be talking to Northwest Bus about this build as well.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious about that. Anyway, I've made it less next week, so maybe I might talk to him a little bit more about this Indira thing, because like I said, I looked at those buses, they look kind of cool, but those are not the ones we're getting, so that's fine. All right, thanks.
Any further discussion? There's a major policy point, Chevy versus Ford. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? I'll say the motion passes unanimously. Next item is consideration of approval to enter into a contract with the Association of Washington Cities for L&I claims management. Go
That
ahead.
would be me. So WTA is requesting the board to authorize the general manager to enter into a contract with the Association of Washington Cities to provide workers' compensation claims management and to execute any extensions under the agreement and approve any change orders within the GM's approval authority without the need for further approvals. board approvals. Just for some background on this, in 2021, our vendor of over 15 years, Comprehensive Risk Management, ended up selling their business to another company called Risk Finance. Risk Finance agreed to honor our contract through the termination or the expiration date of March 31st of this year. In January, as our procurement policies require, we went out and issued a small purchase request, and Risk Finance ended up being the sole responder on that. With their proposal, they used an updated pricing method, and it ended up being a considerable contract increase, and it was based on a percentage of our annual L&I premium versus a flat rate that we had with our previous vendor. So doing due diligence, we went out and looked at some other options, and we found that AWC, who we contract with for our health insurance benefits, currently had a claims management service, and they also have a retrospective service, but their pricing model is similar to Risk Finance, but at a lower rate. The other thing is we found that because we are already a member, we could utilize their services. We also see kind of the program as a good match. Their motto with their program is every employee home safe every night. And it kind of matches up with our health resource center and some of the things we're doing with our wellness program. So it seems like a good match for us. If approved, the new service with AWC would start May 1st. And Megan worked her magic and got our contract with risk management extended through the end of April so that we can have a smooth transition over to the new service. For the fiscal end of this, for the first year of the contract, we anticipate the cost to be $37,807, which is equal to 6.5% of our 2022 L&I premium, and that premium is $581,653. And this amount is accounted for in the 2023 budget. Any questions?
Yeah, Michelle, you said AWC also offers a retrospective service. I don't know what that is.
So it's a service where employers pool together, and if the pool does well, they manage the pool, and if the pool does well, we can get refunds on our premiums at the end of the year. So they kind of manage that pool, and they only allow people in that have good programs. And so we did go forward and ask them if we would be able to be in the pool, and they said we would. There are a few things we'd work with our safety department just to make sure we had a couple of their requirements exactly as they like it. If you're familiar with their wellness program, they have a lot of rules that you have to follow to be able to be in it. So we would have to do a few of those things, but as far as our current rating, which is very good, we'd be welcomed into that program under that.
Thank you. Board members?
I'll move we approve the proposal.
Second.
We have a motion and second for us is to approve the general manager entering into a contract with the Association of Washington Cities for industrial claims management, and also approve any change orders without needing to come back to the board for approval. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Once again, I'll record that as unanimous vote. Thank you very much. We now move on to the consent agenda, which is approval of the routine expenditures and the minutes from the March meeting.
I'll move approval.
And I'll second.
Okay, thank you very much for that. All those in favor of the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay. The consent agenda is approved. Reports to the board. We have two of them. The first one is the rapid transit study update from Mr. Wilder. Maureen, anything to say before we go to Tim?
No, I'd like to turn right over to Tim.
Mr. Wilder.
Okay, this project is an update to the board. We're not looking for any video action today. Hoping for a discussion and questions if you have any about this project. So we've got a lot underway in planning this year, obviously, with you've heard about the zero emission fleet transition study. the sustainability plan. We've got some work being done on BTS with the visioning study and a variety of other things. So this is one of our highlighted projects. Pretty excited to be here to update you on this project. This was approved by the board as a study in 2022. We kind of renamed it. It was named the High Frequency Transit Corridor Study. We felt like a better name, more clean name was helpful. So that's maybe why it's showing up differently than what you might remember from approving it last year. So just some slides here to kind of update you on where we're at with this project, but feel free to ask questions as I go along if you have anything that you need more information about. So really the project started many years ago. There was some thinking internally, I think, within WTA around how could we elevate transit service, and is an idea of a bus rapid transit system within Bellingham feasible. And no work really was underway until I think really the spur for this project was the board's discussion of transformation we had at the beginning of WTA 2040. You might recall we had some good discussion on what is your definition of transformation, and there's some back and forth on this idea of a bus rapid transit study. So since then, we incorporated that work into WTA 2040, our long range transit plan, and then you approved the budget to pay for a study in 2022. Also, the city of Bellingham has contributed money for the study, $75,000, so $150,000, approximately $150,000 project. So there is a partnership there. WTA is leading the project, but we have the city of Bellingham as a strong partner, primarily because of the funding and also where it's located. See our slides. I'll just continue talking, and these are just words anyhow, so hopefully the slides will catch up. This is also a consultant-led study, Transpo. You'll see them in subsequent meetings. They'll be here to talk about when we do have a draft report, they'll be here to present that draft report. And then finally, the last thing to mention is we have a technical advisory committee. That's our main form of engagement to date. It comprises of a variety of stakeholders from around the community, from local jurisdictions to Barclay folks, to social service agencies and others. So it's a pretty wide-ranging group, and they provided some good feedback already to the study. We've had 2 meetings. So, and some of those minutes I included in your packet, just in case you were wondering some of the discussion that we've had with that group. So very robust discussion to date. So why are we doing this project? So this next slide is talking about the purpose of the project. And really, I kind of going back to the overall purpose, it really is to look at ways to improve the overall riding experience for everyone. And I'm talking about not just for people who live in Bellingham, but for others who may live in small cities or the rural areas, because we affectionately call one of these routes we're saying, the 331, as the people's route. And I think there's a good reason for that, and that is many people use that whether or not you live within Bellingham to travel around to get to different destinations. So really the intent there is elevate service for everyone who uses WTA. And then more fundamentally, the purpose of the study is to see if bus rapid transit makes sense for our smaller community. Not too many communities of this size that have done bus rapid transit. So we need to really dive deeply into what that means for Bellingham and Whatcom County. We are looking at 2 particular corridors. One is the green/blue lines, GO lines. That's a consistent north-south corridor through the community, as well as the gold GO lines. And these 2 are kind of competing against each other to see which one actually would make more sense in terms of our priorities. And then secondarily, beyond just bus rapid transit, we're looking at the possibility of making some shorter term speed and reliability improvements. And I'll talk about that in a bit. And then we need to make sure that if we do a large capital project, that we can become eligible for federal grants. The main one is Small Starts. That's used commonly for bus rapid transit systems. And then finally, community engagement. And we're going to be talking about rolling out an engagement platform here at WTA in a couple of weeks. So we should get this project there for people to participate in the study. Okay, so some of the work that's underway right now is on how we define bus rapid transit or rapid transit for Bellingham. The reason this becomes important is because every community has different definitions. They operate bus rapid transit or rapid transit differently, and I'll show some examples of that from a field trip that we recently took. And so we need to define what this looks like to see if different levels are appropriate for our particular system. So some common elements you see for bus rapid transit would be high frequency service, the 60-foot buses, efficient boarding process. You may have elevated platforms, try to reduce dwell times. You might see transit street improvements such as bus running ways, and then branding is also a common element you see of bus rapid transit systems. So Michael Harpool and I had a chance to take a week-long field trip throughout the Pacific Northwest to visit various BRT systems to get an understanding of how they function, some elements that they use to provide efficient service, to understand the process for developing BRT systems. And so these are the ones that we visited over that course of that week. Horrendous weather for the most part. We got stuck in the Portland Snowmageddon while we were down there, but we were able to visit those systems despite the weather and learn a lot about these systems. So we did discover a lot of different types of BRT systems. For example, community transit have their Swift lines. That's a very highway-oriented type BRT system. Hard to think that that could apply to Bellingham because they're operating, for example, on Highway 99. Not too many special features on the street. They have stops that are developed specifically for BRT that are enhanced. You know, the larger stops, they have signage, they have real-time arrival information. But then we also visited communities that had more localized type BRT systems, like the H line in King County Metro, this is a image of the Vine in C-Trans. Some of the elements here would be consistent with what we'd see in Bellingham. But we did find that no one size fits all. That was, I think, the common theme that we learned from visiting. And then a big question for us is most of these systems are in larger communities. We didn't find any to the scale of Bellingham, the 92,000 population, and the density is generally much higher densities, much greater population sizes. So that speaks to how we might look into the land uses, whether or not they could provide the right warrants for us to have this higher level of service.
Tim, you got a question?
Yes.
I guess I'd be interested to know when these were implemented in other cities, did ridership go up by a certain percentage? Because that, in my mind, we could do a lot of things, but if ridership doesn't go up, we're not really helping ourselves other than maybe feeling good. So it'd be interesting to know statistically, did it go up?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that's one of the fundamentals here that we're going to have to understand. And it's difficult to know exactly if it will grow, but I think, and it depends on the land uses around that corridor, whether or not you have the densities there today, and whether or not it will grow over time. And typically these are put into higher ridership corridors already. So you have that fundamental level of ridership to support service. So that's kind of what we saw was in some cases, this is replacing just a basic bus service with more efficient service. So you're growing ridership naturally through being more efficient, easier to board, quicker service, which people like. I think they generally have increased ridership. It's hard to tell right now with just coming off the pandemic, though. And some of these lines are very new, like the Portland TriMet FX line is brand new. So we don't really have any historical data on that.
Great, thanks.
Some of the things we saw too were some range of different designs that accommodate buses on the street. There were shared lanes, business access transit, which is a type of lane that shares access to businesses. So it's like a right turn, right out for general purpose vehicles, but it primarily serves as a transit lane. That's an image on the right. You're seeing what's called a bat lane. It's pretty common now where you don't have a lot of space to work within. Bus bike lanes is also a common element. Queue jumps that we have a couple of those already in Bellingham. Dedicated curbside lane and median busways, which is probably the most intense kind of improvement you can have. Probably not very likely here, given the lack of right-of-way, but that was one of the things we saw. And then just to kind of give a sense of sort of the transformational elements that we saw, this was the H line, used to be Route 120, just came into operation, I think, a couple of weeks ago. And then on the left is before shot with a turn lane. You have some parking, and you have some, you have some side space there for bike lanes. And the transformation was removing that center turn lane, gaining more space for the buses, installing a shelter that you see on the right there. This next one probably shows a little bit better where you've transformed that center turn lane. You have two general purpose lanes, one in each direction with some parking. So they removed the parking, they removed the center turn lane, put a barrier at the stations, created a lane for the buses at the stop, at least this is in one direction. The other direction, the cars have to queue up behind the bus and wait, but they've been able to add a lane in certain cases by removing that center turn lane. So we thought that this would be somewhat analogous to sort of the street, many of the streets that we have in Bellingham. So that's something that we'll be looking into and discussing with the community. And then this is also interesting, how you configure bike lanes along the stations. And so on the left, this is the TriMet FX2, again, just recently was built. You have on the left the bike lane going behind the station. This is where you have room to create that bike lane. And they're also experimenting on the right with bike lanes that go actually through the station, which is an interesting idea. And that's going to take obviously some awareness on both the passenger and the bike cyclist parts. But this was done where you didn't have much space to work with, where you couldn't put the bike facility behind the station itself. So, but I thought I'd share that and show you how, in some cases, the bike lanes have been integrated into these systems. And then the other common theme is partnerships here. So definitely need a lot of engagement with businesses and the community around these changes. And then we also learned there's very high expenditures, particularly around the stops. So these stops are multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars. They don't look that, but they do take quite a bit of work to build. And so just know that there's quite a bit of investment that is needed if you're going to have this level of transformation. Most of these projects did benefit from grant funding, federal grant funding, or other sources of funding to help pay for those improvements. And then finally, just kind of to wrap up the field trip observations, we did see somewhat of a thinking around the shift between a capital intensive corridor project to a more localized improvement. So I think it was Lane Transit District in Eugene talked about the amount of time and the level of effort and the engagement it takes to build a BRT, which is typically 7 to 10 years of work, if not more, at a high cost, and rethinking whether or not just maybe enhanced service would have the same kind of benefit without the high level of capital improvements and the intensity of the process. So I think the bottom line is this is an evolving process that BRT could be as intense as what I'm showing you here, or it could be less than all these different features and still provide some benefit to the community. So that brings me to back to this particular project and back to this idea of how we define BRT. And we're looking at 3 different tiers of BRT here, 3 different scales. I think scales of investment is the right way to talk about this. And the intent here is to provide some guidance on how we evaluate these different corridors and what kind of treatments are appropriate for the corridors, how they would be able to accommodate these different levels of BRT. And so from here, we've started to define what are those particular elements. If you wanted to do everything and make a full BRT, what kinds of elements would you need to provide? So I'm not going to read this whole list, but this is just kind of a brainstorm list of things that we thought were important to incorporate. And then you go down to enhanced. Slide's taking a while to. There we go. Wait, skipped over. This is actually should be tier 2 enhanced corridor. Sorry about the title, where we've dropped some of the service frequency. We've dropped some of the stop elements. So we're trying to kind of pull that back a little bit. Probably doesn't have quite the same level of treatments as the full BRT. And then finally, this idea of local spot improvements where we can enhance our service just simply by improving those hotspots, making some smaller scale changes. And then next, I want to talk a little bit about the goals. So moving along to applying that definition through our goals and through a series of objectives and measures to the corridors. So this is and I guess I should say that in your packet, I had supplied a memo that describes the goals, objectives, and measures. So if you want to get more detail on these, please read that memo. But just as an overview, here are the 3 goals that we've identified using the TAC to help define those things that are important. And the way that we're going to use these goals is to then define the objectives and measures. And the measures are going to be applied specifically to those corridors. So we'll be able to evaluate them side by side to say, okay, yeah, it meets those measures, therefore it could qualify as a BRT, or maybe it's better suited as an enhanced corridor, and one actually functions better than the other corridor. We can prioritize that as our primary corridor. So that's kind of how they're the cascading example of how these would work. And then finally, we're looking at a corridor review, and try to, if I can pull up this mapping analysis. I won't bother. I'm afraid I'm going to lose the slide, but we have a mapping process where we've had the consultants map out the different corridors to identify different features, sidewalk widths, right-of-way widths, where we have hotspots in the corridors, where we have opportunities to overcome those hotspots, to be able to kind of map that out, see visually where those opportunities exist. And some of the findings from that mapping process for these 2 corridors are that both corridors have very limited right-of-way for the most part. Very much different than some of the corridors we've looked at in Washington State and Oregon. Many of those corridors we saw had 3, maybe 4 lanes of travel in each direction, with the exception maybe the H line in West Seattle, or parts of the TriMet FX line, which does operate on Division Street, which is a narrow street as well. But for the most part, these are operating in much greater rights of way. So it does beg the question of, how do we provide a functioning system and overcome some of the limitations with maybe getting stuck in congestion or areas that are narrow to provide a better operating system for buses? Because it doesn't make sense if we have a great amount of investment when we're stuck in traffic. So we'll have to look at those more closely and identify ways that we could address those issues if possible. And I think that's where we get into the need to engage with the community on priorities for the use of street space. And the city, I know, has done a lot of work around, bus lanes and some trade-offs around bus lanes, removable parking. And I think that some of that same discussion will need to be had through this study with bus operations. So look forward to that discussion with the community. The blue-green corridor is preferable in the sense that it has a more direct alignment, north-south alignment. I think consultants really liked the clean pattern of the green/blue line, as opposed to the gold line, which is pretty circuitous around the community. But it does have a major constraint going through Western. It's a pretty slow travel or on-time performance really suffers as we go through the campus area. So we have to take a look at that as well. And then the Gold Corridor, again, it's more circuitous. There are more areas of constraints. It has varying levels of street space throughout the corridor. And it'll probably need more substantial street improvements overall compared to the green and blue line. But it does have quite a few transit-supported development opportunities like Barclay and some of the areas that are zoned for higher densities, additional development opportunities. So that's kind of what we found. Just wanted to show you some of the hotspot examples that we're identifying. On the left is Woburn near Hagen. It narrows down from 4 lanes to 2. And you know that if you've traveled southbound in the PM periods, you do have to wait, right, in that area because of that constrained corridor. So we'll look at that for some opportunities. And then on the right-hand side is High Street going through campus, very slow section. It's narrow. It's difficult for buses to pass if they need to pass. So that's another key area for us to take a look at. And there's a variety of other locations that we've identified as well. Okay, any questions about that part?
Board members, any questions? I've got a few.
I'll just end with next steps once we have.
Can we stop sharing so I can see if any of the board members have comments or questions at this point? Or you can just unmute yourself. So I'm going to make a comment and kind of a question. I guess I've been previously thinking about BRT as kind of an all or none. We make a leap. I really like the fact that we talked about it in terms of tiers, which could easily be translated, I think, into terms of phases, right? That we could make the plan and the expenditures to get up to tier 3 and then tier 2, and then maybe tier 1 will come. If we can think of the tiers also as phases, then it seems like maybe we can get there, or at least we can maximize how far we can get. So is that likely to be a suggestion that this actually becomes a phased approach, not just a tiered approach?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is definitely, this was the concept behind the study, was to look at that phased approach. One of the ways we did that was through this idea of the near-term improvements and addressing hotspots. So those were items that we thought we could do more immediately versus waiting 7 to 10 years for a big project. We can address some of those issues. I think the other dimension that we're looking at within planning is there a way to increase the level of service to maybe a 10-minute service, see how that functions without all this more capital-intensive investment. See how the buses operate, see if we can get some headway management, because that's gonna be needed to deal with delays. So that's the way that we can begin incorporating some of these elements without doing the full investment. So yeah, absolutely, I think that's the concept here.
Board members? I have one other crazy pie in the sky question. Here's my nerd showing. The reason why Captain Kirk defeated Khan is he thought in 3 dimensions. And one of the things that I saw in recent cities I visited is the way they get transit to work is they go up or down. Chicago, they have the L, and other places they have the Metro. I've been riding these systems recently. Maybe Seattle's Big Bertha tunnel big isn't the best example, but there might be a place where going up or down is the solution rather than trying to go wide. And then that would be a 10, 20, $30 million project as opposed to $1 million project. Is that sort of thinking come up yet?
No, we haven't. Honestly, we haven't taken a look at any other sort of grade separated. I think that's kind of what grade separated exactly. Kind of system, you know, just looking at the scale, looking at what we thought was feasible, you know, in terms of finances, and but we haven't taken a look at that specifically yet.
Just keep in mind there is a third dimension as a possible solution. Anything else, or should we go on to next steps? It is
I have a quick question, if I may.
Go ahead.
Tim, I'm training for Ski to Sea, so I'm sorry you're not doing it this year.
Right now?
What's that? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Right now. I'm thrilled that this is happening. I was going to follow up on something Michael just said, and poof, it went away. I remember a million years ago when I was running for some local office, in the planner at WTA, I forget her name, I was filling out some neighborhood thing, and how do you turn on transit? I still remember she just said land use, land use, land use. So, I remember my question. What, Les, I think you touched on this, but what was the process that we previously had that sort of gave some general policy direction from which this effort at exploring rapid transit evolved?
Yeah, Seth, I can describe that to you. I think this really evolved from this idea, the board discussion around transformation, where we talked about what does it look like at WTA to transform into an agency that, I guess, goes beyond just basic transit service. And so I think this is an outgrowth of that thinking, and it basically, we sort of codified, for lack of a better term, in WTA 2040, whether those transformational elements like zero emission vehicles, like the rapid transit study, like sustainability, equity. How do we define equity differently? How do we provide different kind of service versus just our basic service? So I think the idea was, knowing that the ground is shifting below us in terms of mobility, more people teleworking. What's our role in life? What are we going to be doing differently in the future, and what do we need to do to keep up with those changes in society? So that's, at least that's my perspective of where this came from. So it was motivated, I think, mostly from the board, though, in thinking how do we think differently about transit service? Somebody.
Thank you.
Other board members? Okay, Tim, you had next steps.
I had next steps. So let me just finish out here with the follow-up work. So this slide shows you kind of some of those next step ideas. Okay. So the next steps is for us to apply those metrics to the corridor evaluation. So looking at the two corridors side by side, and then we're going to be selecting up to 5 near-term improvements. This gets to your question, Michael, about some near-term things that we can do. Looking for some funding for near-term improvements. We'll have another TAC meeting. We'll have one final TAC meeting to talk about the study recommendations. And I think there's an opportunity to come back to the board if you want to provide another update prior to that final report being submitted. So it's kind of up to you if you want to hear from us again prior to that final step. I did mention that we're going to be doing some community engagement through our online engagement platform. So we're really excited about rolling this out to the community. This is kind of like the Engage Bellingham site, but for WTA projects. So you'll see sustainability plan, probably the zero emission bus study, the BTS visioning project, and some other things that we're working on at one site. So really excited about that. And then we should have a report out this summer, and then we'll definitely check in with the board at that point with the draft report, so we'll have a chance to see what the recommendations are and the direction we're headed prior to doing the final report later in the summer.
Michael?
Yes, I can't see who it is.
It's me, Seth. Just in response to the question you raised, I'd love to get a little update when you're got things refined a bit.
Okay, so I think it makes sense for us to come back maybe after the quarterly evaluation. You can kind of see what some of the results have been, to see how they are performing according to that criteria. Seems like a good place to check in. Does that make sense to the board?
Okay, so a smaller check-in before the draft report is finished?
Yeah.
Board members, anything else? So, like I said, I'm excited by this conceptualization and tiers and their phases. I think it's more exciting to pay for near-term improvements if you see them as a potential first steps towards a bigger, larger goal. They seem more significant if you can imagine them as contributing or creating something bigger in the future. So that's exciting to me because I was kind of worried about this all or none feeling I had, and I was feeling pessimistic about getting there in one big step. Thank you, Tim. Anything else on this item? If not, we'll go on to the agency report given by Ms. McCarthy this morning. Go ahead.
All right, thank you so much. Before I move on to that, I will just say, if we do get bat lanes, I hope I get to be part of the committee that brands and markets our bat lanes. Yeah. So we continue to experience a high number of trespasses downtown and at downtown at Bellingham Station, as well as on our buses. And they're, oftentimes to do with drug use, but there are also other unwelcome behaviors. And as you may recall, we do have a safety team coming on board, but we won't have them in place until June. So a team of us got together to work on, what are some things that we could do in the nearer term. And I just want to share a couple of those with you. We are planning to extend the contract of our restroom attendant at Bellingham Station. That has been successful to some extent in encouraging the type of behavior we do want to see down there. We'll be emphasizing ways that riders can contact us when they see behavior that they don't feel good about. We're going to participate in the mayor's new working group. Les will be representing WTA, at least at first, in that effort. And we're also streamlining the process of accessing confidential counseling for people who have been through.
So those who don't work with Bellingham,
yes.
Can you describe what the mayor's community solutions work group is? Or maybe Seth could do
it. Yes, we have them.
Did you hear me, Seth? Well, I'll take a whack at it. So
I got it.
Okay, great, go for it.
I was trying to unmute with my
R9
gloves on. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, so just for those who aren't from Bellingham, the community solutions work group that WTA is going to be participating in?
Yeah, first off, thank you. I'm glad the WTA not only expressed interest in it, but also is going to be joining us at the table. It grows out of a lot of real concerns from people that work and have businesses downtown and people who use downtown around the lots and lots of drug addicted people who are using drugs in public, and it's a concern. And a number of folks have contacted people like Michael and myself and other council members to convey their concerns. This was seen as a way to convene not only the concerned business owners and people that are active in promoting downtown, but also bringing them closer together with me and key staff so we can hear and work together, come up with solutions, and if appropriate and reasonable, implement them. So that's it in a nutshell. We're going to meet. We're having our first meeting next week, and we envision convening some limited number of times, and then after a period, perhaps switching it to more frequent use. That's probably too long a description. Apologies.
No, thank you. That helps other people. Okay, go ahead, Maureen.
Okay, thank you. I'll also just mention that we're working with our frontline staff on some of these shorter term items. We have a focus group of expediters and operators that are helping to take a look at our trespass policy to see if there are ways that we can improve that. And then we'll also be reaching out to all of our frontline staff to help with a community awareness campaign around safety as well. Let's see. Thank you to everyone who responded, and most of you did, with regard to part 2 of our discussion about the zero emission fleet transition. We do have a date, and that is Monday, April 17th at 3 p.m. And that meeting will be just like this, hybrid, as well as here at WTA. And related to that, we have a decision to make regarding our next bus purchase. And we have an opportunity before us, which is the Federal Transit Administration Low or No Grant Program. We would like to prepare a grant and submit it for 11 hybrid buses. And when I mentioned that to Allie and Michael earlier this week, they suggested wisely that we have a conversation about that because, as you know from part 1, the Zero Emission Fleet Transition Plan, there are aspects of our fleet transition that require decisions based on just sort of the opportunity window that we're in. We find ourselves in a situation like that. So Brian, if you wouldn't mind sharing that document. Let's see. We, as you know, are in the midst of the zero emission fleet transition. And just to remind everyone where we are now, we have 2 electric buses on site. We have 2 on the way later this year. We have 8 that are ordered and that will be here in the next couple of years. And then we have 3 more that we have secured funding for through a congressional earmark. Okay, so at 2025, roughly, we will have about 25% of our fleet will be zero emission electric buses. In the meantime, we have more that we need to replace now. Let's see, we have 6 diesel buses, 3 of which will be replaced by that earmark. The 3 remaining diesel buses plus our 8 hybrids all need to be replaced. That's 11 buses that we need to be placing an order for in the near term. And because by the time we have all of our electric buses on site, 12 to 15 electric buses, we will only have 12 places to charge electric buses. We are recommending that for this grant and for these upcoming orders, we purchase diesels, or excuse me, hybrids. Is that, yes, sorry. I swear I practiced this so that it would sound straightforward, and I'm afraid I've made it very complicated, but we need 11 buses. We do not have the charging facilities at this point, nor do we think we could implement them in time for those to be zero emission buses. So we are planning to go forward if the board is, supportive with a grant proposal for replacing our diesels and hybrids with hybrids. There's also a chart here, and if you'd like, we can go through it, but perhaps you can also just take a look at it at a glance that show that while hybrids are not zero emission, they are a significant reduction in the amount of both diesel fuel that we will use, as well as the tailpipe emissions that are emitted by those buses, and that they also are a significant reduction in noise pollution, which, especially in our neighborhoods, is something that people are quite concerned about. And yes.
So there's no opportunity for no grants with electric, or low as opposed to medium for hybrid?
Well, if you could scroll down just a tiny bit, Brian, this is a little bit of guesswork on our part, but in speaking with the FTA, the fact that we got a fairly large for us grant for electric buses last year probably limits our opportunities somewhat this year to get another one, but at the same time, there is this 25% set aside in the grant program for low emission buses. And sort of the word on the street, at least from our bus manufacturer, is that not many people are asking for, some people are asking for low emission buses, hybrid buses, but a lot of people are looking to buy electrics. So we think that our chances in this grant are also better, relatively better if we're asking for hybrids than it would be if we were asking for electric.
And do you need a decision today, or is this just information?
Well, the grant is due next week.
Yeah. So I've been asked to sign a letter as board president that would go with the application.
Right, saying that if we got the grant, we would be willing to provide the local match. It doesn't, of course, but yes. Yeah, I would say.
Yes, yes. You need it.
It would be great.
Yeah, is there a chance to have it both ways? Could we submit something which says, say, instead of 11 hybrids, like 6 hybrids and 5 electric, but that request would be significantly larger, not just because of the buses, because it would include an infrastructure component. Could we shoot high and also shoot medium?
Well, there's two issues with that. One, the grant does require you to choose whether this is a low or a no emission project. And then there are also, there's one place where you submit your project budget and your project timeline. So I think that would complicate it a bit. But I think more importantly, and maybe Andy, you could speak to this, is what we would do if we were awarded 5 electric buses.
Yeah, so it's my responsibility to have the infrastructure in place for electric buses. In my opinion, we are way in front of our skis with the amount of buses we have, electric buses versus the infrastructure already.
I guess my thought is we haven't completed our zero emission presentation or study yet. And I see this as a step in the right direction, going hybrid, replacing like with like, and potentially upgrading from diesel to hybrid. So I do see this as moving in that direction. I don't know that I'm 100% there with a completely electric fleet yet. So I see this as kind of a compromise between maybe someone that's not quite there, but moving in that direction. So I would support Michael signing the letter.
Can we stop sharing the screen? I want to see other board members. So again, at this point, the administration is requesting, and I will be signing a letter to apply for the next tranche of buses, 11 buses, to be all hybrid, which, as Jen indicated, is definitely a reduction in emissions over the current state. Also, as the table showed, there are certain advantages in terms of cheaper infrastructure costs, a greater range, reliability, and performance. Any other board comments on this?
I guess I'd speak in favor of the hybrid as well, knowing some of the charts we saw with the presentation from last week, that availability goes down, and at some point we're going to have a hard time keeping enough buses on the road, especially the routes that are farther out, without significant infrastructure in either charging or who knows what. So this is probably a nice place to land as we transition. So I'd support signing the letter.
I agree with Scott. I've been kind of middle ground on this, and even just looking at the chart that Maureen put together, as far as reliability and, can it make the whole route, all of that. And yeah, infrastructure is really expensive. I think this is a really good happy medium. I am really looking forward to the next round of electric buses too, because I want to see some of those work for us. That will be exciting. But yeah, I'm in support of this as well.
Okay, looks like the majority opinion is that this is an appropriate next step. This is in no way to be seen as a halt to our vehicle transition, but simply a prudent step to get us in that direction and keep reliability and flexibility and performance high as we make the transition. Which is what we should say in the letter.
Yeah, there you go.
Come on, write that down.
It's recorded.
Maureen, back to you. Anything more from the agency report?
That is everything. Thanks a lot.
Okay, is there any further business before the WTA Board of Directors? If not, we are done exactly at 9 o'clock. Thank you, everyone.
Wow.
We will see you soon. Have a good week and weekend. Bye-bye.